Olá pessoal, bom dia a todas e todos. Hoje aqui uma entrevista especial aqui. Vamos conversar com o professor Thomas Palley, norte-americano, que vive em Washington, consultor econômico, um economista com formação nas melhores universidades americanas, fez um mestrado e doutorado na Universidade de Yale, se formou em Oxford e vai conversar um pouco conosco sobre o projeto dele, Economia para Sociedades Democráticas e Abertas, e vai falar também sobre o que ele tem observado no Brasil nos últimos dias e sobre as análises dele sobre o que vem sendo chamado de neofascismo, o crescimento do neofascismo no mundo. Infelizmente, a conversa vai ser travada em inglês. Eu sei que isso limita bastante a audiência e, enfim, a propagação de uma conversa que vai ser interessante e que toca em temas muito importantes. Depois a gente vai tentar fazer a legendagem dessa conversa para disponibilizar no nosso canal do YouTube. Então, vou agora passar a falar em inglês. Eu peço aos que tenham interesse e que compartilhem, que procurem prestar atenção nas palavras dele e discutam. Eventualmente, se quiser deixar uma pergunta pelo Facebook, eu também passo para ele. A ideia é um bate-papo informal aqui na Tapera. So, Professor Dr. Thomas Palley, welcome here to Tapera Tapera. We are very pleased. We are pleased to have you here with us. And we have a good audience here. I'm sure there will be many people willing to hear your views, your ideas about your project first, and then about what you have been observing in Brazil and elsewhere in the world about the rise of authoritarianism, conservatism, and what some are calling neo-fascism around the world. And this is a particularly important conversation considering the moment we are here in Brazil and the divisions that are arising in our society. So thank you for your presence, and please.
Well, Antonio, thank you for inviting me to do this interview. I'm sorry to the audience that I will be speaking in English. Portuguese is a beautiful mystery to me. You asked me a little bit about my project. In Washington, I have a project that I called Economics for Democratic and Open Societies. It's something I started almost 20 years ago. It was started in response to a sense that it was started in a response to the sense that liberals did not understand what was needed for an open and democratic society. For a very brief while, I actually worked for George Soros's Open Society Institute, and I think that their approach to open society and democracy is a very legal and political one. There is a belief that all that we need is the right laws, the right politics, and then a democratic and open society will flourish. In my view, that is inadequate. We have to look at what are the economic foundations and the economic arrangements that will support and sustain open democratic society. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 20 years, promote that type of economic thinking. I think it fits very well with the project that you have here at Tapera.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I'm sorry, here we are doing some production issues here. Okay, thank you. We'll be glad to cooperate with you to promote your ideas and to promote your projects here in the future. I think those are important initiatives that are all complementary. You know, even a large scale, small scale, medium scale. I think we are all facing grave challenges, and we should strive to cooperate and to increase exchange as much as we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you asked me about Brazil. I'm very glad to be here. I arrived on Monday morning, the day after the first round of the election, and like everyone, it was a dark day to see that Jair Bolsonaro had got such a large percentage of the first round vote. You know, I am an outsider, and so there are things that an outsider doesn't know about a country, but sometimes also the outsider's eye can help the insiders understand a bit. So let me try and share some of my understanding. The first thing that at the moment, I almost have a feeling that Brazil is sleepwalking. It's sleepwalking into an outcome that could destroy Brazilian democracy. And the political challenge is to wake Brazilians up, because I don't think that this is what Bolsonaro has to offer is not what I think most Brazilians support and want. And we have a very, very short window of opportunity to try and wake Brazilians from this sleepwalking. To me, Bolsonaro represents what I call the resurrection of the fascist tradition. It is a resurrection of a tradition that soiled Western civilization 90 years ago. What do we mean when we talk about a fascist tradition? They talk about the will to power. So for the fascist, power is the goal and will is the means. And they use the will, anytime something obstructs their taking power, then they discard political norms, behavioral norms, compromise, tolerance, due process, the law. All of these things become inconvenient to the fascist and they walk over them. They stamp on them. Now, we're not seeing the uniformed mass political movements of the 1920s and 1930s, but I think we are seeing the same political tradition. In the 1980s and 1990s, we had neoconservatives and neoliberals. Ronald Reagan was a neoliberal. Margaret Thatcher was a neoliberal. These are different people today. Trump, Bolsonaro, Erdogan in Turkey, Orban in Hungary, these are neo-fascists.
Philippines.
And I know people don't like to bring back that word because it seems so terrible, but if you try and put them in a political tradition, the analysis takes you back to fascism. So, the challenge then is, why do I say Brazilians are sleepwalking? Well, let me see why. For 20 years, the Latin America Barometer has been polling Brazilians about their attitude to democracy. Okay. Consistently, the polls show 70% of Brazilians like democracy, support democracy. And yet here, they are lining up behind the anti-democratic fascist candidate. This is an inconsistency. Why are they doing it? We look at the election and we say the number one most popular candidate is former President Lula. The establishment, the business elite, the political class, the thieving political class of Brazil have put Lula in prison under fake charges so that he can't run. And when they take Lula off the list, then Bolsonaro becomes the top candidate. How can this be? The Brazilians are sleepwalking because Bolsonaro is the anti-Lula. Okay. So this is our challenge, is to wake Brazilians up to this moment of sleepwalking and the danger they are in. To me, I use the sort of the metaphor, it's as if Brazil is falling under an evil political spell, and our challenge is to break that spell. So, maybe that's what we should talk about, how this has happened, because it's been a long, slow-motion crisis that begins with the impeachment. Actually, it begins before the impeachment. It begins with the obstruction of fiscal policy when Rousseff was president to fight the recession. Yes. This was the start of the opposition. They wanted Dilma Rousseff to fail so that they could take back power, so that they could block the car wash investigation. And this is the beginning. Yes. When they couldn't stop Rousseff in the ballot box, then they turned to the parliamentary coup and the impeachment. And then that was followed by the imprisonment of Lula. So this is a long, slow motion crisis. And I think that is part of the reason why Brazilians are sleepwalking. Because they're not like you and I. They're not experts in political economy. They don't follow politics all the time. They have daytime work. It's a struggle to make ends meet. And so they lose the thread. And that creates the opportunity for a man like Bolsonaro to step in. And that is what's happened.
Yeah, it's a grave danger. I agree with you in many ways. I think the situation is very complex and difficult. I could add that in 2014, after the elections, the Social Democrats, so-called PSDB, they haven't recognized their defeat in the elections, and immediately after the elections, we had demonstrations on the streets against Dilma and so on. So her second term was really very fragilized under strong pressure, and then as a way of perhaps escaping or having some room for maneuver, she decided to put an orthodox, a very aggressive economist as finance minister, and then she was absolutely unable to use fiscal policy to recover us from recession. Quite on the contrary, they aggravated the recession, and they put us in a depression by errors or mistakes in political economy, in my opinion. But also, I think in parallel to that, in the deep veins of our social structure, of our history, we have strong authoritarian roots, we have strong colonial roots, we have a very deep, we have racist heritage, we have misogyny, we have a bunch of feelings or sentiments or ideas that were all, behind the surface. And I think the impeachment and then the imprisonment of Lula and now this Bolsonaro candidacy, are opening the way, opening the box, the Pandora's box, as it is said. I don't know if you agree or...
Well, I do agree that all those things are part of Brazilian history. But to me, Brazilians are democratic and they believe in social progress. And I believe that since the end of the dictatorship, I think it was in 1984, there has been real social progress. And that is what we have to tap into. Yes, there is this bad history. Yes, the Brazilian ruling elite are deeply corrupt, and they have cooperated in enabling Bolsonaro. They cooperated in trying to destroy the Workers' Party, and particularly to destroy the leadership of the Workers' Party. They cooperated in making the recession worse. But we have to speak over that. And we have to reach the Brazilian people. And I believe the Brazilian people are democratic and believe in social progress. And that is why we can still be optimistic about the moment. Because that is the dividend of 30 years of democracy and social progress. If we can put the message to the Brazilians, Brazilian voters about that, I think they will respond correctly, and that is the political challenge. Now, so for me, yes, part of it is let us uncover the history and the truth of what has gone on. But at this time, it's also, I don't think we have enough time to do it properly, and it's too, I'm not talking about this interview, I'm talking about politically. We have 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks till the second round. And so it is, the challenge now is to awaken the sleepwalkers. And so there are some things that we can say. I mean, the elite has tried, first of all, to create an amnesia. In President Lula's 2 terms, this was a small miracle. Brazil grew, wages rose, economic inequality came down. But you would never know that. This was the PT that delivered for Brazil. Does the Globo talk about those glorious years? Does the newspapers and the television stations say what the PT did for working people, for working families? No, it's part of the collaboration. And then no one talks about when the fall from economic grace happened. It was the financial crisis, which started outside Brazil, on Wall Street, and it infected Brazil. And Brazil, the commodity prices came down, Brazil faced a deep recession. Then the elite class, instead of trying to help Brazil fight the recession, they went the exact opposite way. You've already talked about this is perhaps where the PT made a mistake. It tried to overcompromise. It tried to be too responsible. It tried to play too by the rules. And you cannot do that with a thieving, kleptocratic business and political class like Brazil has. And I'm sorry I have to say that, but I do believe that is the truth. They will not give up power easily. They were threatened by the PT. No matter how well behaved the PT was a political threat. And on top of that, then there was the car wash scandal, which threatened to take them all down because the larceny, I mean, we are talking the tens of millions of dollars that individuals and corporations stole from the Brazilian people. This was going to be exposed. And the only way to stop it was to bring down Dilma Rousseff, was to bring down the PT, and that's what they did. And that's what, by the way, the microphone tapes all show. They have the senators with conversations. Does the Globo report that? No, this is how the corrupt media, the corrupt business class, the corrupt political class come together, and they have tremendous power, and in a slow motion, long-running story, they're able to confuse people. So part of it, we need the economic narrative. We can tell the Brazilian people that. Think back about when were the glorious years. It was with the PT. It was not with the Social Democrats or the neo-fascists. So I think that's important.
Okay. Thomas, yesterday we had that conversation in which there was some discussion about the concept of fascism, whether or not it applies to current politics in Brazil and elsewhere. Could you please elaborate a little bit on your views on that, and if you could also try to bring Bolsonaro into this conceptual zone?
Yes. Well, I already talked a little bit about that. How I think that that we've moved a stage. We're no longer in the neoliberal stage. We're now moving to fascist neoliberalism, where you combine the politics of fascism with the economics of neoliberalism. And that, of course, is exactly who Mr. Bolsonaro is. That is who Mr. Trump is. They try and pretend they are with working people. That is how they use populism. Yes. This is the way that populism is the way that they try and fool people. This is why they pretend to be anti-globalization, because globalization is the foreigner, the other, and they can pretend that globalization did it to us. But it's been done inside by the business elite, and they don't really want to end globalization. They actually want to deepen it, but instead they divert the conversation into xenophobia, nationalism, racism, sexism. They make it a conversation about culture, and that's exactly what Bolsonaro does. That's exactly what Trump does. It's a way of distracting people from the real economic story. And so Bolsonaro comes straight out of that ugly 1920s tradition, where a disregard for law. He's talking about torture. He supports dictatorship. He supports extrajudicial killing by police in the name of law and order. But there's no law and there's no order. This is not the way to solve social problems that Brazil has. So it's very easy to see from what he says on television. It would not be hard to think of there being internment camps in Brazil. It couldn't be. It could happen soon. It's not something that we need to think 5-10 years. The man talks in that way, and again, the sleepwalkers, the Brazilian voters, need to wake up to just how dangerous he is. And I do understand his appeal, because you have to realize that what happened over the last 6 or 7 years is the elite, the thieves, the political thieves, the business thieves, they created a political vacuum. How did they do that? Well, they tore down the Workers' Party. The PT is the natural governing party of Brazil, because it represents the people. President Lula remains popular because The ideas that he represents are the ideas that the people support. So this corrupt elite destroyed the PT leadership with these false charges of corruption, as if they were the ones who'd been doing the stealing. In fact, they were the ones who were exposing the stealing. But in the process of destroying the PT, the Social Democrats destroyed themselves.
Yes.
Because that could not be hidden. Temer and his cronies are on tape for all the corruption. They're under indictment but not yet prosecuted. So now the two major parties of Brazil have been destroyed. And that creates a vacuum, and that's where Mr. Bolsonaro steps in. What does he offer? He offers his fascism. What is fascism? It's a mix of authoritarianism and nationalism. Now the authoritarianism is very appealing because he says, look, we have disorder, let me impose authority. And that people think that'll work, but it never worked. If you look at the history of authoritarian governments, the history of dictatorship, then always it ends up far worse. People lose their civil rights, there are murders, lawlessness comes in, but it comes in now through the state, which is even worse than the lawlessness of street gangs. And also with authoritarianism, this is what happened under the dictatorship, comes corruption. Because if your authority is unchecked, then your feeling of ability to steal increases. It's completely unchecked. With it comes economic inefficiency. That's what happened with the dictatorship. We must not forget that. That is the lessons that all the dictatorships around South America show. Look what happened in Argentina with the 30,000 disappeared. Argentina destroyed its intellectual class, its human capital. You go back to the 1960s and 1970s. My wife's family comes from Argentina. This was a country that produced Nobel Prize winners year after year. Now they have nothing. The dictatorship destroyed Argentina's future, and they're struggling to recover it. So Bolsonaro is in that tradition. What about the nationalism? He wraps himself up in a flag, and he pretends to be Brazil. But does he really represent Brazil? Not to me. I look from our side. Brazil is the beautiful game and Pelé. Brazil is samba, bossa nova, tropical, Caetano, Gilberto Gil. It is a powerful, powerful, vibrant, living culture. And that's why Brazil is such a cultural force in the globalized world. How many countries can say that? Brazil is a real global cultural force. And Bolsonaro will destroy all that. He's against multiculturalism. He's a racist. Anything that is different that he doesn't like, he will stamp on. He will destroy. He's against tolerance. He's for torture. So he falsely claims to be Brazil. If Brazilians are watching this, think about what it means to be Brazilian. This man is the anti-Brazil. He is the anti-Lula. He is the anti-democrat, the anti-social progress that I believe that Brazilians in their heart of hearts support. And that's I really do believe that. And that is the message. We mustn't tell voters what they need now. We must ask them what they really want. And I think that if we ask the right questions, is this the man you want, the torturer? Bolsonaro, the defender of rapists, the defender of racists, is this the man you want for president? Bolsonaro, the torturer, the defender of dictatorship, the defender of police killings, extrajudicial killings on the street. Is this the man you really want? Bolsonaro, the neoliberal, in alliance with the banksters, with Wall Street. They want to privatize Petrobras, to Banco Brasil, to steal Brazil's economic future. Is this the man you really want? We only have to ask the questions. I believe the Brazilian voters have the answer. And that is our challenge. Now, unfortunately, too often, too many politicians tell the voters, this is what you need. No. Brazilian voters, this is when we get the dividend of 35 years of democracy and social progress, because it has prepared Brazilians for this moment of crisis. And I really hope that this is a message we can get across in Brazil.
Yes, we have to listen to them, hear their concerns, and to explain them that Bolsonaro is no solution for all of those concerns.
He is on television. with all his ugly speech, with all his ugly actions. Show them that and ask, is this what you want? The defender of rapists. Is it? No, I cannot believe that Brazilians want that. The defender of torturers. But somehow that is, you have to break the sleepwalker.
Yeah, there are very well structured and numerous people that are working, for example, to discredit his previous affirmations and so, for example, he was joking, he was not talking seriously. No, that's not like this. You're exaggerating, and so there's a dispute also.
There is no exaggeration.
Yeah.
If you talk to what people say, the words have meaning. They don't come from nowhere. They come from inside our heads. They reflect who we are. Bolsonaro's words and actions reflect who he is. If someone tries to tell you he's joking, it's a lie. The joke came from inside his head, reflecting the way he thinks about the world. And this is very, very important. This is the way they cover up their tracks, by trying to pretend it's not true. What you think, what the political leaders think, and what their political leaders do is no accident. It reflects who they are, and Brazil must ask, is this the man we want? Is this the man who will deliver the society and social progress and economic progress that we deserve and can have?
Yes. Also, what would you say about those elites that, just like the German elites in the 20s or 30s, they thought Hitler could be useful and that could manipulate him or control him, he would be under control. Or, for example, Chamberlain that went to München and came back celebrating the agreement that Hitler was a sensible man and he would fulfill his words. What would you...
Well, sadly, there are two things. The Brazilian business elite so far has behaved shamefully. It stood aside in the first round of election. Now it has a chance to redeem itself. It must speak out very loudly that this is not the man for Brazilian business, this is not the man for Brazilian society. So far, the Brazilian business elite has behaved terribly. It has a moment, it has a chance for redemption. I don't think it'll take it. Unfortunately, too often, and this is what happened in 1930s Germany. The German elite of that time thought they could control Hitler. They thought Hitler was good for profits and good for industry, and therefore they would go along with him. But soon, Hitler changed the terms of the agreement, and they were working for him, and then that was the road that eventually led to such terrible things. But mind you, when we make a comparison, we must think, 1933 is not 1945. No one knew what was coming. 1933, Hitler in 1933 does not look so different from Bolsonaro. I mean, we say 1933. What happened is then another, I don't think that's where we're headed, but I do think we can have internment camps. I do think political prisoners can resurface in Brazil. This is a possibility with this man. And the business, this is the amorality of business. It is the amorality of our age. It is the amorality of the market. That money and profit before else. Money and profit before even being a citizen. My tax cut before being a citizen. This is the deep, deep failing of the Brazilian elite, and I could say even of the South American elite, and the failing now today by the US elite. There was once a responsible US elite. It exists no more. It's my tax cut. Money and profit, and that's all that counts, and to hell with society. And then that is a recipe for social disaster, for repression, for a man like Bolsonaro, who Brazil does not want. Wake up. If Brazil wakes up, if they can break the spell. It's a funny thing how these political spells work. They're a funny thing. You think sometimes I think politics is a bit like being a sculptor. You have a piece of stone, rock in front of you, you have a chisel. You hit the stone and the chisel bounces back at you. But if you find the crack, then suddenly things open up. And that is what we are looking for, the crack that wakes up our sleepwalkers, that breaks the spell. And I do believe it is just simply to look at Bolsonaro face on. This is what you see. This is what he is. It's not a joke. He's an ugly killer. And do you want an ugly killer as President of the Republic? I don't believe so. As I say, Brazilians are democratic. They believe in social progress. They have a wonderful multiculturalism that is a global force. And all of these are the opposite of Bolsonaro. He is the anti-Brazil, the anti-Lula.
Yes. The situation is terrible. I fully agree with you with the words. And we have to wait for some, talk to people and wait for some crack. You have to expose himself now in the second round. And hopefully he will show up more and more about what's behind himself, and that thing that he's saying what to do. A few days ago, he said he would eliminate activism from Brazil.
Same.
He's saying things.
This is exactly what Hitler said in 1933. Remember, the first concentration camp was Dachau, outside of Munich. It was not a death camp. It was a concentration camp, an imprisonment camp. So that can happen quickly. When you talk of eliminating activists, you talk of eliminating political opposition, and he uses street crime as the excuse to do it. That's how the neo-fascists always work. They say activists are criminals. No, they're not. Activists are exercising their political right, exercising democracy, growing Brazilian society. But he calls them criminals and then puts them in jail, and most people don't have the time to study the cases. Most people may not get the information. Globo will not tell the truth. So this is a problem. Bolsonaro has 5 big lies that he's based on. Lie number 1 is that the PT caused Brazil's economic problems. This is a lie. The PT gave a miracle to Brazil, a short miracle. And then there was a recession, and the recession was deepened by the obstruction of the Brazilian elite. Lie number 2 is that the PT is corrupt. This is a lie. The real corruption, the people who stole and are rich for themselves, are the Brazilian elite. The PT was exposing this by allowing the car wash investigation to continue. Bolsonaro is part of the corruption. As I said, lie number 3 is that he is a patriot, the representative of Brazil. No, he's the anti-Brazil. I talked about it, about how he is the opposite of all of that is so good about Brazil, that the rest of the world so admires. He wraps himself in a flag, but then he's like a death instinct to Brazilian culture and Brazilian society. I think lie number 3 is that he's anti-crime. No, he's not. Yes, Brazil has a street crime problem, and that must be done. And when the PT comes back into power, as I believe it will, then it must do something about it. But what are the causes of that street crime problem? There's narco-trafficking, and there's poverty. That's really that's why it's gotten worse. It already existed even when times were good, but it's gotten worse because of the deep recession. People need to feed themselves. If you have no power, no money, you need food, crime is where some people will go. So how do we do that? We deal with narco-trafficking. We have a strategy for dealing with gangs, and we start the economy going again. The best antidote to crime is economic growth as a job. A job is the best antidote to crime. And yet the elite have contributed to crime by blocking the obstruction. And what will Bolsonaro do? He will murder, torture, imprison, and so he will replace street gangs with political crime. The crime of the state, which kills far more, that takes away, that robs people of their freedom and their enjoyment of life. So he is not anti-crime. He will just supplement the street crime with political crime. And I would say that also, my last point is that he's not anti-corruption either. And we talked a little bit about this, because Authoritarianism breeds corruption because authoritarianism has nothing checking it. That is exactly how some of the worst corruption in Brazil has come about, because there's been no political checks and balances. And maybe that's still part of the legacy of the 19th century, the legacy of the dictatorship in the 70s and early 80s. There was never a full accounting done of that. And so always dictatorship all around Latin America we see. In Venezuela, with this corruption. He says that the PT is the Venezuela. No, he is the future that looks like Venezuela.
Yes.
Because he is the criminal. He will create the corruption. He is the militarist. He will create the corruption like Maduro. It will never look the same. It never looks the same in different situations, different countries. But he is the Venezuela, not the PT. The PT offers a future of prosperity, of shared prosperity, and Brazilians must wake up from their sleepwalking, and so this is our challenge.
Okay. Thank you for coming here. Would you like to add?
No, again, I'm as I leave. It's very sad to see this, because Brazil is a country I love. I've been here many times. I have many Brazilian friends. Brazil is a beacon for Latin America. Brazil has had a development project. It still has the possibility of a development project of an independent nation that contributes to the global order, can be a leader for developing countries, and I fear that Bolsonaro will set back this project terribly. He risks inviting in the U.S. neocon imperialists, integrating, I mean, we see them wanting to sell Embraer to Boeing, getting rid of Brazil's independent capacity to be a power. This is all linked. He's part of the fascist resurrection, which is global.
He would be accepted by the international, some international partners?
Absolutely. Yeah. They always, they weep crocodile tears.
Okay, crocodile.
Trump is ready to embrace the man. He's a friend. But from everyone else, it's crocodile tears, because the moment a possibility of a contract, of business, of profit is there, then this is the sin of our political age. The market has made us amoral. It's made our politics amoral, and we will recover our morality from the people, because people have a morality still, even as the business leaders do not. People have their communities, their relationships. They know that morality, it's almost all they have. They know what it gives to their life. And that, again, I say, I see that the social conservatives claim the moral high ground. This is a lie. The moral high ground is with the PT that wants to improve people's lives and improve Brazilian society. But I fear that too easily Bolsonaro will be accepted, and that's part of the cancer, the international relations cancer of our age, that he will not be checked from abroad. He has not been checked by the Brazilian business elite. He's not been checked by the elite. Antonio, what you do here and what some of your colleagues do here is brave, and I wish you great success.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for sharing your concerns and your evaluations on Brazil. Thank you for sharing this message with our audience here. It's very important to have friends coming from abroad and friends from everywhere helping us in this difficult moment. And thank you. I hope we can have you more times here with us. And thank you. Obrigado a todos que acompanharam a conversa. Como vocês certamente notaram, o tom é de muita preocupação com o Brasil. Muitos estrangeiros não acreditam que esse Brasil do Bolsonaro é o Brasil que eles conhecem, que eles aprenderam a admirar, não é o Brasil do povo brasileiro, e vamos torcer para que nessas próximas 3 semanas as coisas possam mudar para melhor, que as coisas possam virar e que a gente possa superar de maneira democrática essa grave ameaça que está pairando sobre o país e que a gente espera que definitivamente não aconteça, porque vai fazer muito mal a toda a população brasileira. Não é que vai fazer mal à esquerda, ou a ativistas, ou a pequenos empreendedores, vai fazer mal ao Brasil como um todo e ao mundo também, porque eu acredito sinceramente que nós temos um papel a jogar no mundo. Então, thank you again, Thomas. Obrigado aí a todos que nos acompanharam. Assim que possível, a gente vai procurar legendar, se não o vídeo inteiro, ao menos os principais trechos ou trechos de maior relevância das palavras do Thomas aqui. Obrigado. Thank you, Thomas.
Great.
Thank you. Great.